Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the next session in the Organizational Profile Series. Today, we're going to be talking about customers, market segments, and stakeholders, all of which are important, but in this short time, we'll be focusing primarily on customers. So let's get started. If you're writing an application for Sterling, you're ultimately telling your organization's story. If you're beginning or in the middle of your journey for performance excellence, then you're more or less creating your story. The organizational profile serves as the basis of your story to help folks inside and outside of your organization really understand the most important things about you. It's the cliff notes, so to speak, and provides context. Everything in the profile will be further developed and detailed in the process categories. In this part of the profile, we're focusing on who or what groups are the users of your products and services, who are affected by them, and their expectations. Customers really are the basis for organizational existence. Whether you were hired to take care of a customer group through a contract or started a business to provide products or services to a customer group. Looking at this figure, you can see the linkage of customers throughout the Sterling framework. The profile is where you define your customers, including any specific groups, and what the requirements and expectations are. The core value for customer-focused excellence helps you to focus your culture on meeting or exceeding those requirements and expectations. Category 3 is focused on customer and the hows, how your organization determine your customer groups and the requirements, how you build relationships with customers that affect customer satisfaction and engagement, and how you determine the level of customer satisfaction and engagement. Then you have category 7 results, specifically 7.2, that demonstrates your performance results for your key measures of customer satisfaction and engagement. So in this section of the profile, P1B2 to be specific, you want to identify your key market segments. They can be based on geography, volume, or other factors. Next, you want to identify your key customer groups. These should be key players in your organization's story. They're the end users of your products or services, and they give you purpose. You may have customer groupings based on commonality. It may sound easy. Of course, we know who our customers are. But like in Gordon's Mechanic Garage gas station example, when he discussed product and service offerings, this organization didn't realize that they had a different customer group related to video rentals. So this is a really good opportunity to review what services or products you're providing and who's using them. The last group we want to identify here are your stakeholder groups, those who are most affected by your actions. This can be your workforce, partners, community groups, taxpayers, etc. So just one word of caution to you here is that everyone is not your customer. When doing this exercise of identifying customers for the profile, it's real easy to get a long list. Really go to town on listing who you think your customers are. But just remember that for each customer, we need to understand their requirements and expectations. You also don't want to lump everyone into one bucket either. So for example, a hospital may define their customer as our patients. This would probably be too broad. They could, however, define as groups such as inpatient, outpatient, and emergency department patients based on commonality. As an organization matures, you may see further segmentation like cardiac, medical, and obstetric patients. Each of these customer groups or segmentations may have different needs or expectations, so this needs to be considered. So now that you've defined who your customers and stakeholders are, you want to identify what each of them require or expect of your products and services. You also want to understand what expectations they have for your customer support services and operations. This is huge because these requirements will be the basis for how you design your processes in your operations and how you deliver and ensure customer service excellence. Not every customer is going to have the same expectations, So how do they differ for each segment or group? Also keep in mind that you'll be assessing the satisfaction level of your customers related to meeting their expectations and requirements. Knowing what your customer wants or expects is important and may change over time. So how do you know? Well, using various listening methods will help you learn what they expect and need. And some of these methods include surveys, social media monitoring, focus groups, journey maps, and complaint analysis. So these inputs or feedback are then reviewed and analyzed to identify customer requirements. And you reaffirm these each year in your strategic planning process. Once you nail down who your customers and stakeholders are and their requirements of your service, documenting them in a table format is a great way to display them. This slide shows two examples. Both are healthcare organizations and very similar. The customer groupings are listed on the far left. Next to each of them are the key requirements for that customer group. Then on the far right are the chart numbers that display the performance level results related to meeting the requirements listed in that second column. So in the top left example, patients and families is the primary customer grouping with three segments of inpatient, outpatient, and emergency services. The organization then defined its key stakeholders as communities and donors. You can see in this example that the key requirements for each of those customer segments are slightly different. So in summary, what's your story? Remember, it begins with knowing who you are as a company and what you do or want to do best. Because your customers and stakeholder groups, your main characters, directly align to these services. You need to know what your customers want or need. This is so important because this allows you to help solve their problems. It creates and adds value to your organization, and it creates customer loyalty. And ultimately, the more you know, the more you grow. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Debbie. Very insightful. So my summary notes. Bullet 1, identify who, in caps, is consuming what you produce, whether it be a product or a service, and ensure that the entire organization is aware of who the customers are. Everyone is not your customer, so use that who is consuming exercise to identify market and customer segments and their specific needs and/or expectations. Once the segments are understood, identify key stakeholder groups in order to identify workforce partners, collaborators, and community groups to support. Leverage the segments and the key stakeholders to identify and define key requirements through a variety of listening and learning methods, which could comprise surveys, focus groups, some analysis around complaints, and the like. Then you brought up the point of using tables to show that alignment between customer segments and stakeholder groups and their key requirements. So the use of tables, I think, is very helpful for compartmentalizing data against segments and identifying commonalities or differences. And then use customer awareness and insights to understand what you do best as a company and how you need to evolve and innovate to sustain customer and marketplace engagement. Did I get it all?
Perfect.
Okay, because that was a pretty good story that you walked us through in those slides. And that's how I kind of did my summary notes, and it was like a story one week another. Awesome. Okay, let's see what questions we have. Okay, first question. Can you provide an example of where this approach may have identified like a surprise customer grouping?
We all love surprises. Well, first, the approach to writing the profile involves strategic planning. There's a lot of inputs into strategic planning, and one of those should include all of your voice of the customer feedback. And you take that, what you learn from that feedback, and you ask yourself, does this change who we see as our customer? Does this change any of our customers' key requirements? And when I think about this, I think, in healthcare in general, they begun to see family members as customers and adopted that concept of patient and family-centered care. And specifically at Wellstar Pauling Hospital, I know that families are segmented in the same manner that their patients are, and they define them as the loved ones that are involved in patients' care. So families were added as a new key customer segment for them back in 2020 to emphasize their key role as partners in successfully transitioning patients to that next level of care.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah. Okay, can you provide an example where this approach has led to the discovery of some sort of innovation?
Ooh, we love that word, innovation. Well, if you know your customer groups, who they are, and you continue to gain that feedback requirements, you might be able to notice that their needs evolve and change over time. So this change requires your organization to decide at that point, how are we going to meet these new requirements? And this could in turn be that catalyst for innovation that you need. And depending on what you're doing, what your agency does, some organizations practice customer co-creation, where they invite customers and stakeholders to participate in specific design or problem solving processes. Lego did this. They created a crowdsourcing platform to get new ideas for Lego models, such as the Saturn V moon rocket that they just put out.
Yeah, that's a good example. I think didn't Disney do something with their ideas teams, and the co-creation has been around for a little bit, I'm sure it's evolved. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure Disney does a lot.
Yeah. All right. Are there any trigger events to be aware of that would signal a new customer or market segment needs to be considered?
Again, I'll just mention how important strategic planning is. So, for example, if you're performing as part of your planning an environmental scan, or you're doing a community needs or market analysis, you might find a new market or customer group through that process. So, one thing that comes to mind is when a community builds new schools, that in turn draws families to move into the area. This could be, a thing for local hospitals that they may need to plan to add pediatric and even obstetric services to meet those potential additional patient segments. And then I also think, about looking at your customers' behaviors, maybe through sales or the number of visits, to see if there's any increasing or emergency customer groups. I go back to Gordon's example of that gas station auto repair. They saw in their income statement showing that video rental consumers were a prominent customer group for them. So that's just, that was a couple examples of triggers.
Right. Very good. All right. I think I have time for one more question. How else may I apply knowledge of customer market segments to benefit the business or workforce?
Well, there should be a strong correlation between customer requirements and your workforce. To ensure customer satisfaction engagement, employees need to know what customers like, what their pain points are, and how to deliver that service excellence they expect. And it's up to the organization's leadership to identify and communicate these requirements to the workforce. It's when you provide customer-focused excellence, everyone wins. The customer is happy and the organization thrives.
Yeah, I would even imagine, in Anthony's, something that we just listened to in Anthony's replay referred to the fact of, you may want to pull out of providing a service or a product if there's a prohibitive cost associated with being compliant, right? Regulatory requirements prohibit the ability to be in that business. Also, I would think you can apply that to what you've just presented to us, right, Debbie, where if it's just no longer attractive to customers or something that used to be trendy is no longer trending, right? Listening to customers and really understanding not just innovation, but the proper time to exit that area of business could be very beneficial
Right.
in the exercise of identifying customers and market segments.
Indeed.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you very much for your time today. Really enjoyed your presentation, Debbie. Thank you for that. And for the
My pleasure.
participants in today's session, I just, a couple of closing reminders. Don't forget to check in at either floridasterling.com or our new webpage, thesterlingcouncil.org. The video from today's presentation will be posted to YouTube by tomorrow, as I mentioned earlier. And then next week, April 5th, please join us at 12:15 Eastern Time for a leadership briefing on defining your suppliers, partners, and collaborators, which will be featuring our very own Bob Medeiros, CEO, Nature's Coast Quality Associates, LLC. And then also feel free to join us early at noon next week for a replay of Debbie's presentation from today. So I appreciate everyone joining us. I wish you a very happy week ahead. Thank you all.